Hey, Reality Riffing, a much-awaited interview that I did on the landline with Arthur Firstenberg. He's a scientist, he's a journalist, and he's at the forefront of a global movement. After graduating Phi Beta Kappa from Cornell with a degree in mathematics, he was in University of California School of Medicine, Irvine, and he had an injury from an X-ray overdose, which cut short his medical career. And so for the past 38 years, he's been a researcher, a consultant, and a lecturer on the health and environmental effects of electromagnetic radiation, as well as a practitioner of several healing arts. He wrote a book which took him quite a long time to write, but it's just been recently published, called The Invisible Rainbow, where he puts together the historical context of pandemics and increasing electrification of the planet. We have a very interesting conversation about what's currently going on with this current virus and 5G, as well as the history and some of the theory around this aspect of what we are now facing here on planet Earth. I don't always agree with him. I think he's a really interesting guy, and we had a very dynamic conversation. I hope you enjoy it.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How's it going?
Okay.
Thanks so much for working this out for us. My whole team are millennials and Gen Z, so they don't even know what a landline looks like. So we had to. This has been an educational experience for them. This has been very, exciting for them. But I'm glad we worked it out. So thanks for taking the time. So I obviously would love for you, there'll be some people listening to this that have never come across your work around both the Invisible Rainbow and some of your other formative work. So I'd love for you to just kind of dive into obviously we'll talk about current events as we go through, but about what led you to writing The Invisible Rainbow and what kind of experiences and science kind of came as you were doing that research, both personally in your own experience and otherwise.
What led me to write The Invisible Rainbow is the people do not understand, they do not know that radio waves are dangerous. They do not know that electricity and electromagnetic fields are anything but a tool. They're in service of humanity, but otherwise they don't exist to most people. And there's a history behind it. I wrote this to answer the question, we've had electricity in our lives for over a century, no problem. Why is there a problem now? Well, yes, there was a problem. There was always a problem, and it was ignored, and it was buried, and people have not wanted to know. So this is not new, but it's escalated out of all reason and has become an emergency. And that we, personally, I was injured while I was in medical school by dental x-rays. And it changed my life, and it led me to investigate the literature on the biological and environmental effects of electricity, electromagnetic fields, electromagnetic radiation, radio waves, x-rays, lasers, everything that has to do with these invisible energies. We were not taught it in medical school.
Yeah.
And I find myself in 2020, when I started doing the research for the book was back in the late 1990s, where I found myself a refugee from New York City, which had just put up the first digital antennas on top of 600 apartment buildings for what we now call 2G technology. And I barely escaped with my life. And I stopped in a, what's the name of that museum in Minneapolis? The Bakken Museum of Electricity in Life. And that's where I started doing my research actually for this book. It was forming in my mind then. It's like people have to know. And it took a long time to write, partly because I had to live in my car for so many years for not finding a safe place to live because of the spread of this technology. And I started an organization called the Cellular Phone Task Force in 1996 when I saw this coming. And it has grown, and I am now in touch with a couple of 100,000 people in the world who, like me, have realized what is making them sick and are refugees and are forced out of their homes and forced out of their businesses and are seeing the handwriting on the wall that there is no place to run anymore. In fact, I published a magazine with that title from 1999 to 2004. It was called 1997 was the first issue. 2002, I published it for 5 years. It was called No Place to Hide, and in fact, that has come true. And I am now the administrator of a worldwide appeal called the International Appeal to Stop 5G on Earth and in Space. The world is polarized. We have the community of people who have been marginalized, ostracized, driven out of their homes. Some of them actually lost their lives, increasing numbers of them. Increasingly desperate. Where am I going to live? How am I going to protect myself if they blanket the entire Earth with this radiation that is already killing me? And that's a minority of people. We had the first global protest day against 5G on January 25th. Upwards of 250 cities had demonstrations. In, I don't remember, 40 or 50 countries. Still relatively small. We don't have the kind of numbers that the climate change community has, for example.
Yeah, no.
The biggest demonstration on that day, I think, was in Amsterdam, and they got 1,000 people. It's not very many. And then on the other side, we have the general population who's totally oblivious.
Right.
Using cell phones, using Wi-Fi in their houses, irradiating themselves all day and all night long, 24/7, 365 days a year. Cell towers, less and less prominent, less and less visible, disguised as church steeples and little tiny boxes on top of lampposts. And people think nothing of it anymore. And they don't even know that this stuff is dangerous. So there's a failure of communication. More than anything else, it's like how do we talk to one another? We're speaking different languages.
Yeah.
And this is partly what I'm about. This is a lot what I'm about. It's like communicating, getting our numbers, getting the message out, finding new ways to do it.
So let's just talk a little bit about what you kind of outline in the my book's called Invincible Living. So, Invisible Rainbow. Just kind of outline for people who are new to your work what you started to see in terms of these new levels of electrification of the Earth and in pandemics. Can you just kind of run us through that a little bit?
In the 1860s, when millions of miles of telegraph wires began to encircle the Earth, a new disease was described called Neurasthenia, similar to what people who call themselves chemically sensitive, electrically sensitive, environmentally ill today. They're fatigued, they can't think straight, they can't sleep, muscle and joint pains, increasingly difficult to function. But back in the 1860s, it appeared to be for no discernible reason. Prominent people suffered from this. Woodrow Wilson suffered from this in the 20th century. People in high society. Anyway, they could never find the cause for it. Sigmund Freud came around in 1895 and renamed it anxiety disorder, anxiety neurosis.
Right.
And we've been living with this phenomenon of anxiety disorder and panic attacks ever since, but it did not exist prior to the middle of the 19th century when the Earth began to be electrified. I call that in my book chronic electrical illness.
Okay.
In 1889, alternating current spread like wildfire throughout the world for lights and power. Lights had been, for the previous 10 years, gradually being used with both direct and alternating current. Suddenly, in 1889, the technology was improved to where it could be used for power. It could power electric trains. It could do anything. This spread all over the world, and we had our first ever modern influenza pandemic. Influenza used to be known as a sporadic, unpredictable disease that attacked without warning, vanished for years or decades. Nobody knew when it would come back. 1889, suddenly, all over the Earth, there was a massive epidemic of influenza, and since that year, it has returned every year, every winter. That was the first time. The second great pandemic of influenza was what we now call the Spanish flu of 1918. This was triggered by the entry of the United States into World War I with modern, powerful radio stations on board Navy ships, it ringing the West Coast and the East Coast of the United States, the most powerful radio technology that had ever been deployed. The next great pandemic of influenza was in 1956-57, coincided with the first global use of radar, powerful radar stations for civil defense, particularly in the United States, surrounding all of North America on airplanes patrolling the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. Then there was the Hong Kong flu in 1968, which coincided with the first launch of the first large fleet of 28 military satellites in space. That's kind of the history. Today we're dealing with a proposed 12,000 satellites by SpaceX in space, and maybe more. And they are beginning to be launched 60 at a time, and that's the occasion for my warning the world at the present time that if those satellites are permitted to operate and to 12,000 plus satellites are permitted to irradiate every square inch of the Earth with what is now called 5G technology of tremendous power and tremendous bandwidth, that could put an end to life on this planet in short order. So we have been gradually making people sick, mostly without people realizing the cause, and it causes heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. Those are the three biggies.
Yeah.
It causes neurological disease. It interferes with nerve conduction. It interferes with the pacemaker in the heart. It interferes with cell-to-cell communication. But the three biggies that we've come to live with and consider the new normal, every 2 or 3 people get cancer during their lives. Like, people don't stop to wonder why. More than half of the adult population in the United States has abnormal blood sugar, diabetes, or what they call pre-diabetes, and they don't stop to wonder why. The electromagnetic fields exert a force on electrons, traveling along our nerves, in the nervous, and traveling along our heart in the conductive pathways, and traveling along the electron transport chain in your mitochondria, which is where the last step of metabolism takes place. So it's slowing down our metabolism, and sugars are backing up in our bloodstream, and fats are backing up in our bloodstream, and this causes tremendous disease. And it's like it's been compared to the proverbial frog in the boiling water. You turn up the heat gradually, and he doesn't notice that it's turned up, and that's kind of what's happening. Is the little steps we're considering. Oh, this is normal, and we forget that it's not normal, and that it wasn't always this way.
And how can you explain in that, which is, I think, really important information, that humans are living longer than they ever have?
Well, that's part of the result of slowing metabolism. We're kind of all in a state of suspended animation. We're living longer but sicker lives, and at some point, the sickness starts to outweigh the longer, and actually in the United States, lifespan has just started to go down in the last couple of years. But that is one of the effects. You slow down metabolism, you live longer.
So what about all the other factors to kind of the cancer, diabetes, and just depleted immune system in terms of the chemical warfare on food and
absolutely, yes. The pesticide war against the earth is a big contributor to it. Anything that interferes with electron transport poisons the mitochondria, and pesticides will certainly do that. Anything that interferes with the use of oxygen, that deprives cells of oxygen, and there are lots of chemicals that will do that. What I did in my book is I traced I did epidemiology back to about the year 1800, and the most spectacular increase in these diseases occurred, at least in the United States, during the 1930s and 40s, during the program of rural electrification. And suddenly, states that were electrified had 5 to 10 times as much cancer, diabetes, and heart disease as states that were not electrified. And that was before World War II, before and during, and after World War II. Of course, we've had the tremendous onslaught of the use of pesticides, which Rachel Carson warned us about, and we haven't paid attention to her either.
Right.
But that's certainly a big factor.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk a bit about the flu and some of the kind of ideas or influenza, how the virology of it. Or not, but before I do, I just want to, I want to be clear that I believe that the human system is incredibly adaptable, and if there's enough Kundalini and Chi moving through the system, you can actually thrive in all sorts of conditions. So I want to be clear that that is my perspective. Therefore, I'm not afraid of technology, but I think it's important to look at everything from different perspectives. So I'm just curious what you think about in terms of, Chi and our own electromagnetic fields and how we are adapting, and the young people are basically, a different species, and they have a different relationship to electromagnetics and technology than any human generation ever has. I mean, what's your thoughts on these things?
Well, I identify the global electrical circuit, which is studied by atmospheric physicists, with Chi. What is this energy that Qigong practitioners gather into themselves from the sky and from the earth? What is this energy that flows through our acupuncture meridians? It comes from the universe. And this is why I am terrified and warning the world about the prospect of tens of thousands of satellites located in the ionosphere. The ionosphere is the Earth's source of high voltage, which powers the global electrical circuit. And I'll explain the sky, the ionosphere, has a positive charge on it. The Earth is negative. If you go to Oriental medicine, it's the sky is yang and the Earth is yin, positive and negative. The tops of our heads are positively charged. You can measure this. The soles of our feet are negatively charged. The circuit flows through us from sky to earth. We live in an electric field, a vertical electric field of about 130 volts per meter in fair weather. And this circulates all the time. Atmospheric physicists study it. The problem is that atmospheric physicists don't study biology. Astronomers who study the ionosphere and its relation to the sun, they don't hardly study atmospheric physics, and they don't study biology either. The doctors of Oriental medicine are not trained in physics, certainly not in atmospheric physics. But I identify it as the force that goes through our bodies. It is either related to or identical to Qi. And if we pollute it with millions of pulsed, modulated millimeter wave frequencies located directly in the power source, we're going to alter the electromagnetic environment that we evolved with for 3 billion years, that circulates through our bodies and gives us life and health. And no longer will we be able to adapt. It will be, yes, it kind of looks like our youth is maybe more adaptable to this stuff than we were, but heck, I was 30 years old when I was injured by the X-rays. I was young too, and I know plenty of young people that can't go to school anymore because they have Wi-Fi in all the schools. It's not universal that there's a whole range of susceptibility, is what I'm trying to point out.
Sure, I do feel that, definitely, yeah. And you know, in the Kundalini technology, the way that we see it is that we're actually that the electromagnetic energy is being generated by us, not the other way around. The human actually is generating the latent electromagnetic energy, and then there's obviously a relay between the human electromagnetic field and any other electromagnetic field, and that you can strengthen it from the inside out.
Yes, and the human electromagnetic field is comparatively subtle. It's the AC electricity in our homes, the radiation from our cell phones, that's like a sledgehammer to our cells and to our organs. And some of us are more hardened against it than others, but it's boom, boom, boom. And the atmospheric electricity that supplements the electricity that we generate from inside is also subtle. It's very, very tiny.
And so let's talk a little bit about some of the theories around just viruses, flu, influenza, and the just kind of the most people think that these things are contagious in a certain way, and obviously with the current events, we're getting fed a lot of that contagion theory. I would love to hear your thoughts on how you feel like this flu virus is actually moving from quote-unquote person to person.
Well, the flu is different because influenza has such a close relationship historically with sunspots, and since the development of electricity with electricity, and it was proven actually in the 1918 by the U.S. Public Health Service that flu was not contagious. They were unable to transmit the flu person to person by intimate contact. So what is the flu? I think the medical system has the wrong idea about the flu. This coronavirus appears to be a real respiratory virus that is contagious person to person. But I agree with you. I hardly know how to talk about it. It's kind of they've terrified everybody. People don't remember that there's such a thing as immunity, that our bodies are strong, and I don't know. They've shut down society. They've instituted equivalent of martial law. Everybody's afraid of their neighbors, breathing on them, standing near them. I just came back from the grocery store where there were all these signs saying practice social distancing, and it's just wrong. It's like we've forgotten how to respect our bodies. We've forgotten how to live with our neighbors. We've forgotten what life is about. It's not just warfare against some virus that they're telling us is going to destroy us. Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about, as a yogic scientist, I certainly believe that the immune system is depleted by things like alienation, fear, anxiety. I mean, I think that these types of kind of bioenergetic or bioemotional states deplete the immune system, and that there must be some sort of agenda around that. What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I have to agree with you. But what I'm seeing in society is wrong. when I grew up, I was born in 1950. We all got measles and mumps and chickenpox, and the idea was to expose children to them so you didn't get it as an adult and you developed your immunity. That's gone totally out the window. So I don't. The agenda. I don't know what the agenda is, but it does appear that people are terrified and people are obedient and people are behaving like sheep.
Yeah.
And doing what they're told, and we've lost community. We've lost relationships. We've at the same time that we're losing nature, and somehow those two go together. The insects are vanishing, the birds are vanishing, and we've lost our community of fellow creatures, and we've lost our connection to each other somehow, and somehow this is related to the fact that we are increasingly absorbed in looking at screens instead of looking at what's around us.
Yeah. And I mean, weirdly, I think there is also a swing, in terms of, I mean, there's more people out on the streets in Los Angeles than I've ever seen. I've never seen this many people walking
Really?
in LA. Yes, I mean, LA's not a walking city. I think obviously in New York City.
Really, today they're out on the streets despite all the scare of.
Yeah, no, I've been kind of staying. Not going outside that much, just because I do believe that it's possible that they're spraying some sort of aspect of chemical warfare or coronavirus in the chemtrails. I mean, I'm not super paranoid, but these days, who knows? I mean, I am super paranoid, but so I've kind of been trying to not spend too much time outside, but. I went for a walk yesterday, and I mean, first of all, I've never met any of my neighbors. Second of all, everyone was out on the street, nobody wearing masks, nobody wearing gloves. People were in their yards, social distance, hanging out. I mean, people are still keeping social distance, but there does seem to be some odd swing where people are like working from home and spending more time with their families, and I don't know. I mean, I think there's definitely something very odd going on.
Wow, that is not happening where I live.
Yeah.
The streets of Santa Fe, New Mexico, are deserted.
Yeah.
And I went out at 8 o'clock the other night, and the only people out on the street were people with mental disorders screaming.
Yeah.
Those are the only people I see, and it's like I would love to be in Los Angeles and see people actually in the streets like I used to. I miss it.
I mean, it's kind of, I had seen, I've been driving to my studio, which isn't that far from my house, but, so I had seen some people out exercising, definitely exercising people, but, I mean, I was shocked yesterday, so I do feel like I'm kind of surprised about Santa Fe, because Santa Fe is so, I feel like there's so many, kind of rebels and kind of expatriate types that are there.
You would think so, but they're also obedient now. They're staying in their homes. They're keeping 6 to 10 feet apart from each other. They're all wearing masks. They're all wearing gloves. Even when they go out for a walk, the only people that are not doing that are the people that are walking their dogs. They're not wearing masks. They actually say hello to me. Everybody else doesn't. It's kind of weird. That's good to know that Californians at least are still out in the streets, maybe more than before. That's really good to know.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a couple questions. I had put it out to our audience that I was interviewing you this morning, and a couple people asked them if they had any specific questions. So let me just ask you a couple of these questions that people had sent in. One, I think this is a common question, which is, what are the best ways what's the best thing we can do to protect ourselves and our families?
It's becoming increasingly difficult to do that, and there shortly will not be any way to protect yourself if these satellites go into service. There will not be escape from that anywhere on the planet. And it's not the direct radiation that I'm terrified of. It's the alteration of the Earth's electromagnetic field, which goes through our bodies, and there's not any. It's what keeps us healthy. It's what keeps us alive. The old answer used to be turn off get rid of your wireless technology, go back to corded phones, go back to wired computers. The wiring in houses is better than it used to be, but you can call in experts, building biologists who are trained in how to measure electromagnetic fields and mitigate the fields in your house. You can, within your own house, eliminate all of the local sources of electromagnetic fields, and it will improve your health. But increasingly, you can't, because there are cell towers everywhere, and you're sharing transformers with your neighbors that are using all this wireless technology, so it's coming in over your wiring. The electric companies are putting smart meters right on your house, and there's nothing you can do about it, and they shut off your electricity if you refuse them. So we're getting less and less able to control our environments. There are companies that prey on people who are non-scientists and who want to protect themselves by selling these products that supposedly you plug into an outlet in your wall or a pendant that you wear around your neck, and it's supposed to protect you from the electromagnetic radiation around you. It doesn't. That is a physical impossibility, and most of these products emit their own fields, which makes them either useless or harmful.
That's good to know, because I think there's a lot of that on the marketplace.
Yeah, and these companies are making a lot of money over people's fears.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do any good. You can shield, like if there's a cell tower on one side of your house, or you can paint your wall with shielding paint that contains metallic particles. You can. There are real products out there, but eventually, when it comes from all directions and from the sky, they don't work anymore.
Right. And another question is about basically the bigger historical context of humanity on planet Earth. And was there any earlier? Are you aware of any earlier electrifications of the planet? Because I was just in Egypt. It's obvious that there was all sorts of electrical technologies happening in a different kind of idea of what our history looks like on planet Earth. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't buy into that at all.
Okay.
I think, if that had happened in ancient Egypt, they would have destroyed the Earth as we are doing it very quickly. And it did not happen.
Okay. Anything else that you feel like people need to hear right now, just in the kind of mass hysteria and pressure of current events?
Well, a couple of things. One is to stop being terrified of the coronavirus. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. That the coronavirus is not the enemy, and your neighbor is not the enemy. I'm not sure what else to say about that. The other thing I wanted to respond to is there are a lot fewer airplanes in the sky than there used to be with all this shutdown. What people are calling chemtrails is simply condensation trails from airplanes. And if you look up and you notice they are not there anymore, or much less, it's because there's a lot less air traffic. Chemtrails is a conspiracy theory that was invented by a couple of white supremacist con artists in Ohio in the year 1995, and it's not real.
Interesting. Haven't heard that one yet. White supremacist con artists.
Yeah,
okay.
Wayne Lou Harris. He was a member of the Aryan Nation. He started advertising that there was genocide from lines in the sky, and he was going to analyze agricultural soil for a fee. And he found aluminum and barium and strontium, and he claimed that it was falling from the sky. And this eventually was popularized on coast-to-coast radio in 1999, and it's gone viral, and people believe it. But it's simply a result of the enormous expansion of air traffic all over the planet.
Interesting. Well, it certainly makes sense. And Arthur, how can people follow your work and just hear more? Are you writing a new book right now?
No, the book that I published in hardcover in 2017 was just picked up by Chelsea Green Publishing Company in paperback, and it was just The Invisible Rainbow: A History of Electricity and Life. That just came out in paperback in March.
Wow. Okay, I didn't realize that. I knew you had been doing this research for so long. I didn't realize.
Yeah, I self-published the hardcover in 2017. It is now sold out, and it is available, at least for the time being, in paperback from Chelsea Green Publishing Company. If people want to get on my mailing list, they can go to 5GSpaceAppeal.org. That's the 5G Space Appeal, the international appeal to stop 5G on Earth and in space, and sign the petition, sign the appeal. And anybody who signs is automatically on my mailing list and will get my newsletters.
Great.
And again, that's 5GSpaceAppeal.org.
Amazing. Okay, well, thank you so much for working the tech out with us, and thank you for your work and your knowledge, your wisdom, and your activism. And we are really blessed to have all of this knowledge going out to our listeners, and just wishing you some good nature, and hope you stay safe and keep healthy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Arthur. Thank you for your time.
You too.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Reality Riffing. These are conversations that I think are important with people who are doing great things in the world about subject matters that need to be discussed. If you enjoyed the content, the conversation, please feel free to share with your people, share with your friends and family, rate the podcast below, and also subscribe.